What if the single greatest barrier between you and unlimited wealth isn't your education, your connections, or even your current circumstances, but simply a number you haven't discovered yet? Before we begin this profound journey, please hit that like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing our global community of prosperity seekers coming together. Has this ever happened to you? You work tirelessly, follow conventional financial advice, save diligently, yet abundance seems to slip through your fingers like water. What if I told you that the most prosperous individuals throughout history have accessed a hidden dimension of financial manifestation that ordinary people know nothing about? Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share has transformed thousands of lives across 6 continents, yet remains hidden from mainstream financial discourse. This isn't about stocks, real estate, or investments. This goes deeper, tapping into the very mathematical fabric that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered governs universal abundance. For over a century, a numerical sequence revealed through metaphysical research has been silently turning ordinary people into wealth magnets. Financial advisors won't tell you this, because it bypasses their entire system of control and limitation. Think about it. Our entire universe operates on mathematical principles. The golden ratio appears throughout nature. Sacred geometry governs everything from flower petals to galaxies. Is it really so hard to believe that wealth also follows specific numerical patterns? What you're about to discover contradicts everything you've been taught about money. We've been conditioned to believe wealth requires decades of struggle, sacrifice, and sophisticated strategies. But what if that's all been an elaborate distraction from a much simpler truth that Florence Scovel Shinn understood over a century ago? I was skeptical too. As someone trained in conventional financial theory, I was conditioned to dismiss anything that couldn't be explained by traditional economics. But after witnessing transformation after transformation, a struggling teacher who manifested an unexpected inheritance, a debt-ridden graduate who suddenly received multiple job offers, a retired nurse whose forgotten investments suddenly multiplied, I couldn't deny the pattern anymore. The secret lies in a specific number that, when written exactly 17 times with precise intention, creates a vibrational frequency aligning directly with universal wealth currents. This isn't wishful thinking or visualization. This is cosmic mathematics programming the field of infinite possibility to deliver abundance specifically to you. Don't believe me yet? That's perfectly normal. Your rational mind is designed to reject what it doesn't understand. But consider this. Quantum physics has proven that observation affects reality at the subatomic level. If consciousness can influence particles, why couldn't it influence the particles forming your financial reality? In the next few minutes, I'm going to share exactly how Florence Scovel Shinn's student discovered this numerical sequence, and how a forgotten secretary named Maria Santos used it to transform from penniless to prosperous in just 21 days. If you want to continue discovering these ancient prosperity secrets, make sure to subscribe to our channel, where I reveal powerful numerical codes that can transform your financial reality. Maria's journey perfectly illustrates why this works. When she first heard about Florence Scovel Shinn's numerical teachings in a small metaphysical gathering, she wasn't looking for positive affirmations or mindset shifts. She'd tried all that. What she needed was fundamental rewiring of her relationship with universal abundance. You see, this isn't about positive thinking. Let me be absolutely clear. Visualization, affirmations, vision boards, these approaches can have value, but they're operating at reality's surface level. What I'm sharing operates at the quantum level, where reality itself is programmed through specific vibrational frequencies. Think of it as the difference between trying to influence weather with thoughts versus understanding mathematical patterns that actually create weather systems. One is wishful thinking. The other is applied cosmic science. When Maria began writing this numerical sequence, she wasn't just engaging in ritual. She was literally reprogramming the energetic field around her, changing the hidden matrix, determining which opportunities, people, and resources are drawn into your experience. Florence Scovel Shinn's revelations show us that wealth isn't something we chase. It's something we tune into, like adjusting an antenna to receive clear signals. Most people spend entire lives on wrong frequencies, wondering why abundance eludes them, while others attract it effortlessly. This numerical code 741 isn't random. It contains within it the mathematical blueprint for manifestation that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered through her deep study of spiritual law. Each digit represents a specific cosmic principle that, when combined and activated through focused intention, creates an unstoppable command to the universe. Transformation begins the moment you understand that universe doesn't respond to need or desperation. It responds to mathematical precision and energetic alignment. When Maria first implemented this hidden truth, her life didn't change overnight. But on day 12, something shifted. An old friend contacted her about a business opportunity she would have previously dismissed as impossible. 5 days later, she received an unexpected refund from a tax office that had overcharged her years before. Small shifts at first, but they represented fundamental change in her energetic signature. Impact wasn't just financial. Her entire relationship with possibility had been recalibrated. The journey toward abundance isn't about forcing or struggling. It's about aligning. When you write this number exactly 17 times, no more, no less, you're creating a specific frequency pattern resonating with abundance current that already exists all around us. Now I want to go deeper into the exact protocol that Maria followed, because details matter immensely in this process. Each step contains precise instructions that, when followed exactly, create perfect conditions for financial breakthroughs. But first, I need to explain why most people get this completely wrong. Trying to manifest from lack rather than power. If you're beginning to sense the profound implications of what I'm sharing, I'm right in the comments. I'm ready to realign. The most critical insight about manifestation that most teachers miss is this: you cannot receive what your energy field isn't calibrated to recognize. This is why so many people can practice techniques for years without tangible results. Their internal frequency simply isn't aligned with what they're trying to attract. Think of it like this: your consciousness is similar to a radio receiver. If you're tuned to 98.7 FM, it doesn't matter how loudly a station broadcasts on 104.3 FM. You simply won't pick up the signal. This is the hidden truth behind why some people effortlessly attract wealth, while others struggle despite doing all the right things. Before you can effectively work with the numerical sequence, you must first recalibrate your internal frequency. This preparatory step is non-negotiable. Without it, writing numbers becomes merely mechanical exercise rather than transformative ritual. Journey toward abundance begins with this fundamental shift in your energetic signature. The first crucial step in recalibration is making a powerful declaration that Florence Scovel Shinn taught. I am the perfect expression of God's abundance in action. This isn't religious statement, but metaphysical one, acknowledging your connection to infinite source of all creation. When you speak these words with genuine conviction, you're making profound energetic declaration to universe. These words weren't chosen randomly. Each component carries specific vibrational significance. I am connects you to divine essence and creative power. Perfect expression specifies your role as conscious manifestation of abundance. God's abundance links you to infinite source. In action, declares this wealth isn't theoretical, but manifesting in tangible ways through your being. What happens when you make this declaration with authentic feeling is nothing short of remarkable. Your entire energy field begins realigning. shifting from frequency of lack to frequency of abundance. It's like adjusting consciousness dial to precisely the station where universal prosperity broadcasts continuously. This declaration serves as essential catalyst, bypassing logical mind and speaking directly to subconscious where deep-rooted beliefs about worthiness to receive abundance reside. Impact of these words, when spoken with conviction, begins dismantling limiting beliefs, blocking your natural prosperity flow. Maria described feeling immediate internal shift when she first spoke these words, not just emotionally but physically, as if something had literally realigned within her body. This sensory experience is common among those approaching this declaration not as mere affirmation, but as statement of absolute truth about their essential nature. Understanding how this declaration prepares consciousness to receive and correctly utilize numerical code is crucial. Declaration acts as key unlocking your receptivity to specific vibrational pattern contained within numbers. If you're feeling resonance with this concept of energetic recalibration, type in comments, "I'm tuning in now." When you speak this declaration, something profound happens at energetic level. Each syllable creates ripples in quantum field surrounding you. Vibrational pattern of these specific words acts as code reprogramming your relationship with universal abundance. This isn't mystical thinking, it's practical application of quantum principles to financial reality. Consider the revelation physicists made decades ago. Everything is energy vibrating at different frequencies. Money, opportunities, relationships. These aren't solid fixed realities, but energetic patterns responding to and aligning with your energetic signature. Each word in this declaration sends specific signal to universe that you're consciously choosing to reject frequency of lack and fully embrace frequency of unlimited prosperity. Transformation begins the moment you truly feel weight and power of these words, not as hope or wish, but as acknowledgement of what already is. You're not asking universe for abundance. You're declaring your natural state of being as extension of infinite supply. This subtle shift makes all the difference in the world. To understand how powerful this approach can be, let me share Maria's journey. The year was 1987, and Maria's life looked nothing like she had once imagined. At 34, she worked as secretary in a small accounting firm, earning barely enough to cover basic expenses. Her tiny studio apartment felt like prison, and constant anxiety about next month's rent had become her most faithful companion. Behind scenes of her carefully maintained professional appearance was woman drowning in debt and desperation. She had tried everything, working overtime, cutting expenses to bone, even attempting small side businesses that inevitably failed. Cycle of lack seemed unbreakable. Prison she had somehow built without knowing how to find key. What made Maria's situation particularly painful was contrast with her earlier dreams. As a young woman, she had imagined life of purpose and prosperity. But somewhere along the way, those visions had faded, replaced by dull monotony of survival. Spark in her eyes had dimmed, and once vibrant energy had been replaced by resignation. On quiet Sunday afternoon in March, with nothing better to do and nowhere else to go, Maria found herself sitting in back row of small community center, where spiritual teacher was giving lecture on Florence Scovel Shinn's prosperity principles. She hadn't come looking for answers. At that point, she had stopped believing answers existed. She simply wanted somewhere to be. That wasn't her cramped apartment. What she heard that afternoon would fundamentally alter course of her existence, not through inspiration or motivation, but through specific actionable protocol addressing root cause of financial struggle. Energetic misalignment with natural state of abundance that is everyone's birthright. If you recognize yourself in any part of Maria's story, disappointment, struggle, feeling that prosperity is for others but not you, type in comments. I'm ready for my breakthrough too. As Maria sat in that room, she represented millions trapped in same cycle of financial anxiety. What most don't realize is how deeply constant worry reshapes our biology. Each morning, Maria would wake with knot in stomach, body flooded with stress hormones, before even opening eyes. This persistent alarm state had literally rewired her nervous system, making it impossible to access brain parts associated with creativity, opportunity recognition, and strategic thinking. Psychological impact of financial struggle extends far beyond simple worry. It creates pervasive shadow coloring every experience, relationship moment. For Maria, even simple pleasures like enjoying coffee became tainted with calculations about cost and whether she could afford such luxuries. This constant internal accounting created prison more confining than physical walls. Revelation that would transform Maria's journey began when speaker took stage that afternoon. Unlike most financial speakers, she didn't begin with budgeting tips or investment strategies. Instead, she spoke about hidden reality existing beyond visible world. Reality governed not by physical laws we learn in school, but by principles of vibration and frequency that Florence Scovel Shinn had discovered. Everything in universe, she explained, is energy in motion. What appears solid is actually vibrating at specific frequencies. Your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, these aren't abstract concepts, but actual energetic patterns interacting with field of infinite possibility, surrounding us at all times. This perspective represented radical departure from conventional wisdom, while most financial experts focus on external actions. Earn more, spend less, invest wisely. She was addressing root cause of financial struggle, energetic misalignment, with natural state of abundance permeating universe. Hidden truth revealed was that prosperity isn't something we achieve through struggle and sacrifice. It's our natural state. One we've been trained to disconnect from through generations of scarcity programming. What looks like financial success is actually just return to our natural relationship with universal supply. For Maria, sitting in that audience, these ideas initially seemed abstract and removed from practical problems. But as speaker continued explaining how specific vibrational patterns could be intentionally generated to align with prosperity consciousness, something deep within Maria began to stir, recognition transcending logical mind. Most powerful insight came when speaker explained that universe operates according to precise mathematical principles. Just as music creates harmony through specific numerical relationships between notes, our relationship with prosperity is governed by numerical patterns either supporting or inhibiting abundance flow into our lives. What happened next provided Maria with specific tool that would permanently alter her relationship with money and opportunity in ways she couldn't yet imagine. If this concept of reality as responsive to vibrational frequency resonates with you, write in comments. Vibration is everything. Atmosphere in room shifted noticeably when speaker lowered voice and leaned toward audience. What I'm about to share with you now, she said, isn't something you'll find in any published books or articles. Audience, including Maria, instinctively leaned forward. There's something primally compelling about being offered hidden knowledge. Information reserved for those who have found their way to exactly right place at exactly right time. She called it the number that rains abundance. Specific numerical sequence that, when used correctly, creates direct energetic channel between consciousness and universal flow of prosperity. This wasn't just another manifestation technique. It was revelation of underlying mathematical code governing abundance itself. Universe, speaker explained, isn't chaotic system that modern science often portrays. It's divine mathematics, precise, intentional, responsive to those understanding its fundamental equations. This perspective offered profound reframing of reality itself. Rather than seeing world as random or arbitrary, she presented coherent framework where everything unfolds according to exact mathematical principles. Through decades of studying Florence Scovel Shinn's work with various metaphysical traditions, she had discovered something remarkable. specific frequency creating perfect resonance with material manifestation. Just as tuning fork vibrating at 440 Hz causes another tuning fork of same frequency to vibrate in response, this numerical sequence creates vibrational pattern universe itself must respond to. Hidden truth behind this discovery is that abundance isn't something we need to fight for or struggle to obtain. It's natural state of universe, built on principles of expansion and growth. Only barrier between us and unlimited prosperity is our vibrational misalignment with these fundamental patterns. Number she was about to reveal served as precise recalibration tool. Way to adjust personal frequency to match frequency of abundance itself. What makes this approach fundamentally different from conventional financial strategies is that it addresses root cause rather than symptoms. Most people spend lives trying to manipulate external circumstances. Working harder, networking more, investing strategically, without addressing internal energetic patterns, actually determining which opportunities and resources flow into their experience. For Maria, this perspective represented complete paradigm shift. After years of focusing exclusively on external actions and seeing minimal results, she was now being offered a tool that would transform relationship with prosperity from inside out. As speaker prepared to reveal specific number, Maria felt strange certainty taking root within her, knowing that transcended usual skepticism. If you're feeling that same intuitive recognition, that there's mathematical order underlying our experience of abundance, type in comments, the code makes sense. Number, speaker revealed with reverence in voice, is 741. Simplicity of it created momentary confusion in audience. Could something so ordinary looking really hold such transformative power? But as speaker began explaining origins and significance of this specific sequence, profound elegance became apparent. This wasn't just random number invented or discovered through trial and error. It was cosmic blueprint for creation, mathematical code existing throughout human history, but obscured, hidden within esoteric texts and ancient wisdom traditions including Florence Scovel Shinn's deepest teachings. What made speaker's contribution remarkable was ability to decode this numerical sequence for practical application in modern life. Revelations she shared came from decades studying metaphysical principles across multiple traditions: Kabbalah, Hermetic philosophy, ancient sacred mathematics, and quantum physics. In each tradition, she found fragments of same fundamental truth. Specific numerical sequences create vibrational patterns, directly influencing material reality. This number isn't arbitrary, speaker explained. Its precise formula composed of 3 divine principles that, when combined, create powerful manifestation command to universe. Deeper significance of 741 lies in understanding individual components and how they interact to create unstoppable momentum toward prosperity. Journey to understanding begins when we recognize numbers aren't just quantities. They're living energetic forces with specific qualities and influences. Each number carries unique vibrational signature, interacting with consciousness and field of infinite possibility surrounding us constantly. Behind scenes of visible reality, these numerical vibrations are constantly shaping what opportunities, resources, circumstances flow into our experience. Most people remain unconscious of these influences, allowing random numerical patterns to determine financial reality, rather than intentionally working with specific sequences for desired outcomes. Transformation that 741 creates comes from its unique mathematical structure. It's not just sequence of random digits, but carefully calibrated formula, where each component amplifies and completes others, creating harmonic resonance with universal abundance frequency. To understand profound power of this numerical sequence, we need to break down each component and see how they work together to create unstoppable command to universe. Let's begin with first digit 7. In metaphysical traditions across cultures, 7 represents divine perfection and spiritual completion. Think about it. 7 days of creation, 7 chakras, 7 colors in rainbow, 7 musical notes creating complete octave. 7 is number of mystical understanding and direct connection to source. In 741, this 7 represents your divine authority, to command abundance as spiritual being having human experience. It's recognition that you're not separate from creative force of universe, but expression of it. Moving to second component, we encounter number 4. Throughout wisdom traditions, 4 symbolizes foundation, stability, and manifestation in physical world. 4 elements, 4 seasons, 4 cardinal directions. This number represents solid grounding of spiritual principles in material reality. In 741, 4 ensures that abundance you're calling forth isn't just spiritual concept but tangible, practical prosperity manifesting in your physical experience. It's bridge between invisible realm of possibility and visible world of form. Final component is number 1, symbol of new beginnings, leadership, and individual creative power. 1 represents your unique position as conscious creator of your reality. In 741, this 1 declares that you're not victim of circumstances, but originator of your experiences, through conscious choice and focused intention. When these 3 components combine to form 741, something remarkable happens. You're no longer just working with separate numerical energies, but with integrated formula, creating specific vibrational signature universe. Recognizes immediately. Every time you write 741 with conscious intention, you're issuing multi-layered command. I claim my divine authority to command abundance as 7 and ground it in practical manifestation I4, through my individual creative power the want. Now I want to explain exactly how speaker instructed audience to work with this number. Because simply knowing 741 isn't enough. Method of application is equally important for activating its full potential. This is where most people miss crucial elements, transforming simple numeric sequence into life-changing tool for prosperity consciousness. If you're feeling resonance with this numerical formula and its potential to transform your relationship with abundance, type in comments, 741 is activating my prosperity. Specific number of repetitions is where many people miss crucial energetic alignment, making this method so powerful. Speaker was adamant that 741 must be written exactly 17 times, no more, no less. This precision isn't arbitrary, but mathematically significant in profound ways most prosperity teachers have never understood. When we add 1 plus 7, we get 8, number of infinity and abundance, in numerous spiritual traditions. Visually, 8 even resembles infinity symbol turned vertically. In sacred numerology, 8 represents material mastery and unlimited flow of resources. Hidden truth is that by writing 741 exactly 17 times, you're activating infinite abundance frequency aid, while encoding manifestation with specific prosperity blueprint. 741. This creates unbreakable cycle, where initial manifestations generate momentum for even greater abundance, establishing perpetuating spiral of prosperity. Behind scenes of this numerical repetition, something remarkable happens in neurological patterning. Act of writing same sequence 17 times creates new neural pathways beginning to override previous scarcity programming. Brain literally begins reorganizing itself around new abundance frequency, making prosperity default expectation rather than surprising exception. For Maria, this understanding created moment of decision. Sitting in that audience, hearing explanation, she faced choice that would define her financial future. Continue with conventional approaches that had failed for years, or embrace this alternative pathway with complete commitment. Transformation began when she chose to follow ritual with devotion of someone with nothing left to lose. There was no half-hearted experimentation. No skeptical trying it out to see what might happen. She approached practice with same seriousness she would give any crucial treatment or life-saving protocol. Impact of this wholehearted commitment cannot be overstated. When Maria implemented numerical sequence exactly as instructed, she wasn't just performing mechanical exercise, She was engaging in profound energetic recalibration, addressing root cause of her financial struggles. Journey wasn't instantaneous. First few days after beginning practice, Maria noticed subtle shifts in perception and awareness. Opportunities she would have previously overlooked suddenly became visible. Solutions to problems that had seemed insurmountable began presenting themselves with surprising clarity. By second week, these internal shifts began manifesting as external changes. Unexpected refund arrived from insurance company. Former colleague contacted her about part-time project perfectly matching her skills. Small synchronicities began occurring with increasing frequency, each strengthening her connection to abundance current she had activated. Now I want to walk you through exact protocol Maria followed. Precise method creating direct channel between consciousness and universal abundance frequency. If you're ready to follow same pathway to prosperity consciousness that transformed Maria's life, type in comments, "I'm following the protocol." Protocol isn't casual suggestion or general practice to be adapted according to personal preference. It's precise science with specific parameters, activating particular energetic responses in both consciousness and universal field. Each detail carries metaphysical significance, contributing to transformative power. When working with universal laws, precision matters tremendously. Think of combination lock. Being close to right numbers isn't enough. Exact sequence in exact order creates opening. Similarly, each element of prosperity protocol has been calibrated to create specific vibrational signature, resonating with abundance frequency. Hidden truth most manifestation teachers miss is that universe responds to precise instructions, not vague intentions. When you understand exact science behind energetic recalibration, you realize details that might seem arbitrary are actually crucial components of energetic equation. Journey begins with very first step, which must be taken at specific time with specific materials. Upon waking, before checking phone or engaging with digital distractions, you must find clean, unmarked sheet of white paper. This timing is crucial because mind exists in unique state during first moments of consciousness. Liminal space between subconscious and conscious awareness, where programming is most effective. Significance of using white paper goes beyond practical considerations. White represents pure potential in metaphysical traditions. Blank canvas upon which any reality can be created. It symbolizes field of infinite possibility existing before manifestation occurs. By using clean, unmarked paper, you're literally creating pristine energetic space for new prosperity consciousness to take root. Behind scenes of this seemingly simple instruction is profound understanding of how consciousness interfaces with physical reality. Paper serves as more than writing surface. It becomes tangible anchor for vibrational pattern you're establishing, creating bridge between invisible realm of intention and visible world of manifestation. For Maria, this initial step represented significant mindset shift. Prior to learning protocol, her mornings had begun with worry and anxiety about financial pressures. By replacing that pattern with focused prosperity practice, she created fundamentally different energetic foundation for each day. Once you have clean white paper ready, there's specific writing instrument you must use, one carrying its own symbolic and energetic significance in prosperity protocol. For this ritual, you must use pen with blue ink. Never pencil, never black or other colors. This isn't arbitrary preference, but connects to universal language of energy, where different colors carry distinct vibrational signatures. Blue represents truth, trust, and communication in energetic lexicon. Revelation here is that color itself is vibrational frequency, interacting with prosperity formula you're establishing. Blue ink resonates with clear communication between you and universal abundance forces, ensuring your command is received and understood at deepest levels. With white paper and blue pen prepared, next crucial step is creating personal energetic signature anchoring intention in specific coordinates of time and space. At top of paper, you must write today's complete date, followed by your full legal name. Significance of this step goes far beyond simple identification. You're establishing exactly who is issuing prosperity command, and exactly when it's being initiated. This creates unique energetic timestamp, distinguishing your intention from all others being sent into universal field. Hidden truth is that universe responds to specificity, not generality. By anchoring prosperity command with precise temporal and personal coordinates, you're creating clear channel for manifestation, connecting directly to your individual energy signature. For Maria, this step represented profound claiming of creative authority. By writing her full legal name, Maria Elena Santos, she was declaring divine right to prosperity and abundance. After years of feeling insignificant and overlooked by forces of fortune, she was now asserting presence and power in universal system. Directly beneath your name, you must write specific activation phrase. I am the perfect expression of God's abundance in action. Unlimited prosperity flows through me now. These aren't random words, but precisely calibrated affirmation, creating essential mindset foundation for numerical work that follows. Now comes central practice activating prosperity frequency, creating sacred geometric pattern with number 741. You must write this number exactly 17 times in balanced grid pattern on page. Pattern itself carries energetic significance, amplifying power of numerical sequence. Hidden truth is that sacred geometry, arrangement of forms and numbers in specific patterns, creates energetic templates universe recognizes and responds to. By writing 741 in balanced grid, you're establishing harmonious mathematical structure resonating with universal abundance frequency. As you write each digit in sequence 741, you must feel its unique vibrational signature. Feel creative authority of 7, grounding power of 4, individual sovereignty of 1. This conscious engagement is activation key for entire process. Universe doesn't respond to empty ritual, but to vibration you generate while performing it. Simultaneously with numeric focus, maintain specific visualization. See money and resources flowing to you from unexpected directions and sources. Don't limit this to conventional channels. Expand awareness to include paths of abundance you haven't conceived yet. Most powerful manifestations often arrive through channels we could never have predicted. By keeping visualization open to unexpected sources, you're instructing universal intelligence to find path of least resistance for abundance to reach you. As you visualize prosperity flow, feel emotional freedom this abundance brings. Not just abstract concept of having more money, but visceral sensation of liberation, possibility, expansion accompanying true financial freedom. This emotional component is activating force, bringing prosperity command to life. Once you've completed writing 741 17 times with full consciousness and proper visualization, fold paper precisely into 4 equal sections. This quartering represents 4 cardinal directions, signifying abundance can flow to you from all points of universe. Folded paper now serves as physical anchor for prosperity frequency you've established. Carry it in wallet or purse for exactly 21 days, maintaining constant energetic connection with abundance vibration you've activated. During these 21 days, something remarkable happens in subconscious mind. New prosperity frequency begins systematically replacing old scarcity programming that may have been operating undetected for decades. This isn't just psychological shift, but fundamental rewiring of relationship with abundance at energetic level. What makes this approach fundamentally different from temporary practices is creation of persistent energetic field, working continuously whether you're consciously focusing on prosperity or not. Charged paper maintains vibrational connection 24 hours a day for full recalibration period. Most crucial aspect is specific consciousness you must maintain throughout these 21 days. Single most common reason people sometimes practice protocol without experiencing full breakthrough is performing ritual with empty heart or doubt-filled mind. Think of 741 like phone number to cosmic forces governing prosperity. Your emotional state while performing ritual is send button. If you write numbers mechanically while mind is filled with doubt or emptiness, it's like dialing number without pressing send. Call never goes through. Journey toward prosperity consciousness requires emotional authenticity. Universe doesn't respond to empty words or mechanical actions, but to vibrational signature created by genuine feeling state. When you write those numbers with absolute certainty, profound gratitude, and joyful expectation, you're generating precise frequency activating prosperity response. For Maria, this understanding was transformative. Her initial attempts had been performed with desperate hope, rather than confident certainty. Shift in results came when she began approaching practice, not as broke person begging for money, but as divine being claiming abundance that was already rightfully hers. Impact of this subtle shift in consciousness cannot be overstated. It literally determines whether you're operating as creator of financial reality or victim of external circumstances. Distinction isn't philosophical but practical, determining everything about your results. During Maria's 21-day activation, first week brought primarily internal shifts, new sense of peace about money, decreased anxiety, subtle changes in how she perceived opportunities. By second week, external synchronicities began appearing, unexpected information, chance encounters with people who became important connections, small windfalls arriving precisely when needed. By day 21, her energetic signature had shifted so dramatically, she was literally living in different relationship with prosperity. Universe responds not to who we were yesterday or hope to be tomorrow, but to who we're being energetically right now. Maria had successfully transformed her being state from scarcity to abundance. Decisions she made from this new consciousness opened doors that would have remained invisible from previous perspective. Casual conversation with former colleague revealed business opportunity she would have previously dismissed as impossible. Unexpected settlement arrived from forgotten legal matter. These weren't random coincidences, but direct responses to her newly aligned prosperity consciousness. What you now possess is nothing less than ancient mathematical key that can permanently transform your financial reality. This knowledge has been carefully guarded through generations, shared only with those prepared to receive it. Profound simplicity of this practice, writing 741 17 times with proper consciousness, belays its extraordinary power to recalibrate entire relationship with prosperity. Decision point you face now is identical to one Maria encountered that afternoon. Having received this revelation, will you approach it as merely interesting information, or will you engage with it as transformative, protocol demanding complete commitment? Variable determining everything about your results isn't technique itself. That has been proven effective across cultures and decades. Only variable is you. Knowledge without implementation creates no change. Many people collect spiritual techniques like intellectual trophies, prideful of what they know while experiencing no tangible transformation. Wisdom separating those who permanently transform prosperity consciousness from those remaining in lack is simple. Committed action trumps passive knowledge every time. Universe responds not to what we know intellectually, but to what we embody consistently. When you commit to this 21-day practice with full presence and emotional